I needed the money. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled into the employee parking lot at Sunset Cove Water Park. The Miami sun beat down on my car, which didn't have working AC, and I was already sweating through mid-shirt before I even turned off the engine. The online job listing had promised competitive pay for lifeguards, and as a broke college student heading into my junior year, I couldn't afford to be picky. My swim team experience made me qualified, at least on paper. I grabbed my backpack, locked my car, and headed toward the staff entrance. The park wasn't open to the public yet. He checked my watch. 8:15 a.m., 15 minutes early for my 8:30 meeting with the manager. Good start, I thought. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt with the Sunset Cove logo waved me over as I approached the gate. He had the weathered look of someone who'd spent too much time in the Florida sun. "Michael Reynolds," he asked. "That's me," I said, extending my hand. "Everyone calls me Mike." "Robert Martinez, park manager." His handshake was firm. "Glad to have you on board. Your swimming credentials are impressive. For years on your collect team here, though, I'm taking a break this year to focus on classes." Robert nodded and began leading me through the empty park. The place was eerily quiet without visitors, just the sound of pumps running and water flowing. Through the various attractions, we passed the wave pool, a lazy river, and several twisting slides that rose up overhead. "We run a tight ship here," Robert said as we walked. "Safety is our priority. We haven't had a major incident in years, and I'd like to keep it that way." Something about the way he emphasized major incident made me curious, but I didn't ask. Instead, he nodded and tried to look appropriately serious about water safety. Robert stopped at a door marked staff only and swiped his key card. "This is our break room and locker area. You'll meet John Sullivan inside. He's been with us for, well, longer than anyone. He'll show you the ropes and go over some specific procedures we have here at Sunset Cove." The break room was small but clean, with a mini fridge, microwave, and a few tables. A man sat at one of them, staring at a cup of coffee. He looked up when we entered. "John, this is Michael, our new lifeguard." Michael John Sullivan. John didn't smile or stand. He just looked at me with eyes that were very alert and watchful for someone sitting in a break room. His skin was rough and weather-red from years in the harsh Florida sun. He looked to be in his late 40s, but moved quickly like someone much younger when he finally stood up. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," Robert said, order backing toward the door. "John will go over everything you need to know." Hegev. John, a nod that seemed loaded with meaning before leaving. For a moment, John and I just stood there in awkward silence. I was about to make a joke about the weather when he spoke. "You swim competitively." It wasn't a question. "Yeah, for years in college." "That's good. You'll need to be strong." He picked up a red folder from the table. "Your uniform and rotation schedule are in here. First shift starts at the wave pool, noon to 4. But before that," John reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He smoothed it on the table and pushed it toward me. "Thesia, the rules. Learn them." I looked down at the hand. 1. Stay in your chair during drownings until backup arrives. 2. If you see a woman behind the maintenance shed after hours, ignore her. 3. If a man waves to you from the deep end of the pool, wave back exactly once for never opened or use the blue locker in the staff locker room. 5. Alert me immediately if fog appears over any water, regardless of whether I read the list twice. Waiting for John to crack a smile or say it was a joke. He didn't. His face stayed completely serious. "Is this some kind of hazing thing for new employees?" I asked with a nervous laugh. John's expression didn't change. "Follow these rules or you'll die." The bluntness of his statement caught me off guard. "No, you might get fired or it's for your safety. Just you'll die." "Okay, sure," I said, trying to play along. "Stay in the chair. Avoid creepy women. Wave at pool men. No blue locker. Watch for spooky fog." "Got it. This is Anna," joked Michael. His voice had dropped lower. "These rules keep Plilev." I nodded, not sure what else to do. Clearly, this guy took whatever were tradition this was very seriously. Maybe it was some elaborate prank the staff played on newcomers. I'd go along with it for now. "I understand," I said, trying to sound sincere. John studied my face for a moment. Then, seemed satisfied. "Get changed. I'll show you around before your shift starts." The locker room was standard. Rows of metal lockers, showers, bathroom stalls. John pointed me to an empty locker where I could store my things. "You can use any unclaimed locker except the blue one." "No," I finished for him, still thinking this was all some weird game. As I changed into the red shorts and tank top with lifeguard printed across the chest, John waited by the door. He seemed tense, his eyes always moving, checking corners and shadows. The tour of the park was thorough, but strange. John didn't just show me where everything was. He showed me exactly where to watch, how to keep my eyes on the water, and which paths to take peat stations. He went over the safety rules with a seriousness that seemed over the top for a pool job. Always scan the bottom of the pool every 30 seconds, he said as we stood by the edge of the main pool. Count the pool in your zone when you start your shift, then count again every 5 minutes. Standard lifeguard procedure. But the way he said, it made it sound like a special routine. By the time noon rolled around, I was starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake taking this job. But the thought of my empty bank account kept me climbing up to the high chair overlooking the wave pool as guests began packing into the park. The first few hours of my shift were normal enough. Kids splashing, teenagers showing off, parents trying to relax while keeping an eye on their children. I stayed alert, blew my whistle a few times at runners, and helped a lost child find his mother. I noticed John wasn't sitting in his chair by the deep end of the main pool. He was standing beside it, his posture stiff. He's always looking at the water, not just casually watching, but staring with such focus. It was like he expected something to come up from the bottom at any moment. He hardly blinked. When my break came, I headed to the staff room where I met a few other lifeguards. They seemed normal enough, talking about guests and upcoming shifts. I wanted to ask about John Andy's strange rules, but something stopped me. Instead, I ate my sandwich and listened to their conversations, trying to catch any hint that they found the place as weird as I was beginning to think. The rest of my shift was quiet. As closing time approached, the number of guests got smaller. The announcement for final swim came over the loudspeakers, and 30 minutes later, the park was empty, except for staff. I was helping clean up some trash when I noticed John making his rounds, but they weren't casual walks around the park. They were careful, thorough checks of every pool, every water feature. He would stop at specific points, stare into the water for exactly the same amount of time, then move to the next spot. It looked less like end-of-day inspection and more like some kind of strange routine. When I finished my duties, he headed back to the locker room to change. That's when I saw it. The blue locker, somehow. I'd missed it earlier. While all the other lockers were a standard gray metal, this one was painted a deep blue. And now that I was alone in the room, I noticed something else. Faint black stains around its edges, like something had leaked out and been quickly cleaned up. Rule 4 suddenly felt less like a joke. That locker gave me the creeps. I chinked it quickly, keeping my back to it, unable to shake the feeling that something inside might be listening, waiting. As I walked to my car in the evening light, I couldn't help glancing back at the main pool, still visible through the fence. The water should have been still with the pumps turned off for the night. It wasn't. Across the surface, a ripple moved from one end to the other, as if something had just passed beneath. Something big. I stood frozen, watching until the water went still again. Then I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove away much faster than the parking lot speed limit allowed. Maybe it was just the wind, I told myself. Maybe a pump was still running, but I knew better. And suddenly, John's rules didn't seem like hazing anymore. I spent the night trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I thought I saw in that pool. The ripple could have been anything. A leaf blown across the surface, a pump still running, maybe even my imagination after a long first day. But no matter how I rationalized it, I kept circling back to John's rules and his deadly serious warning. I barely slept. The next day at the park was busy now to keep my mind occupied. But I found myself watching John more closely, the way he walked the deck. Eyes always looking around the water, stopping at exact spots to stare at certain areas. It wasn't normal lifeguard behavior, not even close. 2 days after receiving those strange rules, I was stationed at the lazy river, sitting in the high chair that gave me a clear view of the Insomnia.official waterway. The summer heat beat down hard and the water shined under the midday sun, as floated by on colorful tubes. I kept checking left to right, top to bottom, watching for any signs of trouble. That's when I noticed her, a small girl, maybe 8 years old, who had somehow slipped off her tube in the deeper section where the river curved behind a rock formation. Her head bobbed up once, arms waving wildly before she went under again. How had John moved across the entire park in seconds to save that little girl? A week into working at Sunset Cove had changed me. I'd gone from laughing off John's rules to jumping at shadows and researching drownings from the 1970s. Meeting in white really freaked me out. But like any broke college student who needed money, I kept showing up for mid-shifts, The Tuesday afternoon sun was hot on my shoulders as I watched over the main pool from my lifeguard chair. The heat brought out a good crowd, families splashing in the shallow end, teenagers showing off on the diving board, and a few adults swimming laps in their lanes. Just normal summer stuff at what seemed like a normal water park. I'd been looking back and forth across my zone, just like John taught me. Left to right, top to bottom, checking the pool floor, then the surface, then the deck. The pattern had almost become relaxing. That's when I noticed something weird in the deep end. The water was moving strangely, not from swimmers or the filters, but from below, circles spreading out from a spot where nobody was swimming. None of the guests seemed to notice. They kept splashing and laughing, not seeing what was happening. I leaned forward in my chair, trying to see better through the sun's reflection on the water. The circles got bigger, and then I saw it, a dark shape coming up slowly from the bottom of the pool. My throat went dry. I grabbed the arms of my chair, ready to blow my whistle when the shape came close to the surface. It looked like a man with pale skin, floating straight up and down in the water. As I watched, unable to move, he rose until his head and shoulders came out of the water. He raised his hand in a wave, water running down his arm. Rule 3 popped into my head. If a man waves to you from the deep end off the pool, wave back exactly once. I felt nervous as I raised my hand and waved back, just once, like I was supposed to. The pale man stayed there for a moment, water splashing around his shoulders. His face looked weirdly and clear. Then, slowly, he began to sink back down. The water closed over his chest. The circle slowly stopped, and the pool went back to normal. I sat stiff in each chair, sweating, not just from the heat. Had anyone else seen it? I looked around at the guests, but everyone just kept doing what they were doing with no idea what had just happened. When my replacement came for my break, I climbed down from the chair on wobbly legs. "Okay," asked my replacement, a guy named Drew, who'd started a few days before. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Just the heat," I mumbled, not trusting myself to say more. In the break room, I found Emily eating a sandwich at one of the tables. She'd been working at Sunset Cove for 3 summers now, according to what I'd overheard. If anyone besides Jean knew what was going on, it would be her. I grabbed my lunch from the fridge and sat across from her for a minute. I just ate in silence, trying to find the right words. "Hey, Emily," I finally said, keeping my voice low despite us being alone. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up, weariness immediately crossing her face. "Depends on what itis. Have you ever seen anything strange in the water? Things that shouldn't be there." Emily's expression closed off completely. She set down her sandwich and looked toward the door as if checking whether anyone might walk in. "You've been talking to John?" she said, not a question. "He gave me the rules on my first day." She nodded slightly. "Good. Listen to him. But what are these things? The woman behind the shed, the man in the pool." "Stop," Emily cut me off, her voice sharp. "Just follow John's rules," she whispered, leaning closer. "That's how you survive here." "So, you've seen them, too?" She didn't confirm or deny, but the look in her eyes told me everything. Emily had seen things made worse than what I'd encountered so far. 3 summers, I said. "How have you listed that long?" "I pay attention. I do exactly what John says." She gathered the remains of her lunch. "You should too if you want to make it through the season." As she stood to leave, I asked, "One more question. What happens if you break the rules?" Emily paused at the door. "Ask Robert about last summer staff." Then she was gone. I sat alone in the break room, my appetite gone. Through the small window, I could see John walking around, stopping here and there to look into each pool. What did you see that the rest of us missed? With 20 minutes left of my break, curiosity got the better of me. The door to Robert's office was open, but he wasn't inside. On a hunch, I checked a filing cabinet in the corner. The top drawer was unlocked with employee files inside. I thumbed through the folders quickly, looking at dates, current season, last season, the season before that. I pulled out the file for last summer and spread the papers on Robert's desk. The staff roster showed 15 lifeguards at the start of the season. By August, only 7 remained. Next to the names of those who'd left were brief notes. Resigned personal reasons. Terminated. Rule violation. Terminated. Unauthorized access. 2 files were marked simply as status sunken with strange symbols drawn in red ink at the bottom of the page. I flipped through more records, finding Apaton every summer. Sunset Cove lost nearly half its staff before the season. Way too many people quit. Even for a summer job, some personnel files had those same red symbols marked on them. They looked like nothing I'd ever seen. Not letters or numbers, but weird shapes that were hard to look at for long. The sound of footsteps in the hallway sent me scrambling to return the files to the cabinet. I had just closed the drawer when Robert appeared in the doorway. "Michael," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "What are you doing in here?" "Sorry," I said, hoping I didn't look as guilty as I felt. The door was open. I was looking for the sunscreen we keep for guests. Someone asked for some at my station. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded toward a cabinet on the other wall. "Top shelf. Make sure you get back to your post on time." "Will do," I said, grabbing a bottle of sunscreen as cover before heading out. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't stop thinking about those files and the strange symbols. Every time I looked at the deep end of the pool, I half expected to see the pale man writes and gagging. As the day ended and guests began to leave, I noticed Robert watching me from the office window. Several times throughout the afternoon, I caught him giving me concerned looks. It was making him nervous. During closing procedures, as I was cleaning up some trash near Zach Bar, Robert approached me. "How are you settling in, Michael?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes watchful. "Fine," I said. "Everyone's being helpful." Robert nodded, looking out over the now empty pools. "John tells me you've been following the protocols." Well, I knew he wasn't talking about standard life. "I'm trying to—" "Good." He hesitated, then added, "We lost 3 Lefakwids last summer. They either quit without notice, or he trailed off." "Or what?" I prompted. Robert's expression tightened. "Or they disappeared. One day here, the next gone. No calls, no texts, personal items still in their lockers." "What happened to them?" "They broke the rules," he said simply. Then, seeing my reaction, he added, "John knows what he's doing. Without him, we'd all be gone. This place, it needs someone like him." "What is this place?" I asked. "What's really going on here?" Robert checked his watch, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of our conversation. "Ask John if you want details. Just know that following his instructions isn't optional. It's survival." He left then, leaving me with more questions than answers. As I finished my closing duties, I looked around for John, but he seemed to have disappeared after his final rounds. The sun was setting as I walked to my car. I kept thinking of Bootweight Robert had said. People had disappeared here. Not just quit, but finished, and everyone talked about it like it was normal. Expected even. I was halfway home when I stopped at a red light near the beach. Issa Road. As I waited for the light to change, something on the street corner caught my eye. A figure in white. My blood went cold. It was her, the woman from behind maintenance shed. She stood perfectly still amid the moving pedestrians, her long wet hair partially obscuring her face. Even from this distance, I could see water pooling at her feet. I blinked, and she was gone. The car behind me honked as the light turned green. I drove on, gripping the steering wheel tightly. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The pale man in the pool, the woman in white appearing outside the park. It was as if they were following me, learning about me. I thought about quitting. I should quit. Any sane person would walk away from whatever was happening at Sunset Cove. But as I stared at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't. Something about that place had its hooks in me now. Whether it was curiosity or something darker, I felt trapped. Not just by my need for the paycheck, but by a growing obsession with understanding what lurked beneath the surface of those pools. I'd survived a week following John's rules. But how much longer could my luck hold out? And what would happen when the entities decided that simply watching me wasn't enough? 3 weeks into my job at Sunset Cove Water Park, I was getting used to the weird routine, watching the water, helping lost kids find their parents, and following Jay's mysterious rules that kept me alive. I'd seen the woman in white and the man who waved from the deep end. I'd done my research on the park's dark history, but nothing prepared me for what happened next. I pulled into the employee parking lot that morning and immediately noticed us. Ronfa police cars were at the main entrance with their lights flashing. I felt nervous as I parked and rushed toward the staff entrance. Small groups of employees stood together talking quietly. Robert was by the gate talking to 2 officers, looking worried. Before I could get close enough to hear what they were saying, John showed up beside me. "What's going on?" I asked. John looked toward the officers, then back at me. "Drew didn't go home last night. His roommate called it in." Drew, the part-time lifeguard, who'd started a few days before me. Nice kid, always joking around in the break room. I'd covered his station a few times when he needed a break. "Did you tell him about the rules?" John asked suddenly, his voice dropping low. I shook my head. "No, I didn't think." John's face He went into the blue locker. Nothing left of him now. I felt cold even though it was hot that morning. How do you know? The locker was open this morning, and there's always residue. Hadn't explained further, and I wasn't sure I wanted him to. Robert finished with the police and called us together. He explained that Drew hadn't returned home after his closing shift and that officers would be checking the premises. We would open as scheduled, but some areas might be temporarily closed for the investigation. As everyone headed to their stations, John grabbed my arm. Be extra careful today, he warned. When something like this happens, the others get excited. The others? I asked a woman in white. The man in the pool. John nodded once. And worse things. There's milled death. He left before I could ask anything else, leaving me with the awful picture of Drew opening that blue locker after everyone had gone home. What had happened to him? What was inside that thing? The morning went by in a rush of whistles and putting sunscreen on kids. I was working at the wave pool, watching families splash and scream as the fake waves came in every 15 minutes. But I couldn't stop thinking about Drew and what John had said. After lunch, I switched to the kiddie pool, a shallow, colorful area with tiny slides and water sprays. It was usually an easy spot. Parents stayed close to their toddlers and the water barely reached the kids' knees. I sat in the chair looking over the water like John had told me. That's when I saw it. Small strips of mist showing up just above the water. Not steam. The water wasn't heated, but in curls of fog coming from the shallow pool. I blinked hard, thinking the eyes were playing tricks, but the mist was definitely there, getting thicker each second. Rule 5 hit me alert. John immediately if fog appears over any water. I grabbed the radio clip to my shorts. John, it's Michael. There's fog over the kiddie pool. The radio buzzed for a second before John's voice came through tense and quick. Don't move. I'm coming. Within moments, John was running across deck, moving faster than seemed possible for a man his age. When he saw the mist now making a layer over the kiddie pool, he yelled to the nearest staff, full of exclamation "Oh!" Robert appeared beside him, took one look at the fog, and grabbed the microphone for the PA system. His voice boomed across the park. Attention all guests, due to an unexpected maintenance issue, Sunset Cove Water Park is closing immediately. Please make your way calmly to the exits where you will receive a full refund or rain check. Other lifeguards began helping guests out of the pools and toward the exits. Parents grabbed confused children. Teenagers complained, but everyone moved. I stood from my chair, ready to help, but John grabbed my arm. Stay with me, he ordered. We need to contain it. The mist was spreading fast now, not just over the kiddie pool, but stretching toward the larger pools and water features. Within minutes, thick fog covered the entire aquatic area, cutting visibility to just a few feet. The air turned cold, raising goosebumps on my arms and legs. Even in the summer heat, through the fog, I saw things moving. Tall, thin shadows sliding between thick pools. They moved in a strange way, leaving no footprints on the wet. What are those? I whispered, pointing. John didn't look. Don't acknowledge them. Don't speak to them. Don't even look at them directly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that caught the dim light. A small metal disc covered, with symbols similar to those I had seen in the employee files. He pressed it into my palm. Hold this until the fog clears, he said. Don't let go of it, no matter what you see or hear. The amulet was warm on my skin, and it seemed to buzz with energy. John pulled out another one for himself, then started walking a specific pattern around the pool deck, stopping at certain spots to say words I couldn't understand. He stayed close behind, holding the amulet tightly. The shapes in the fog grew more numerous and bolder. They moved around us just out of clear sight, looking strange and wrong, like their arms were too long, and they bent in ways they shouldn't in. Strange sounds filled the air. Not quite words, but sounds that almost made sense. Like a language I'd forgotten, one shape came closer than the others, its top part tilting like it was looking at us. John stepped between it and me, holding up his amulet. The shape moved back, sliding into the thickest part of the fog. We kept walking this weird route for what felt like hours, John following his path, while I stayed behind him, holding the. Slowly, the fog started to clear. The shapes backed away. That strange sound stopped, and it got warmer. By late afternoon, the fog was completely gone, leaving the pools as calm as ever. John took back the amulet, looking extremely tired. It's over for now. What was that? I asked. What were those things in the fog? The less you know about them, the safer you are, he said, putting both amulets in his pocket. Check the pool. Edges there. Sure enough, when I looked closely at the concrete edges of the pools, I found long scratch marks, threparal lines, too evenly spaced to be random, too deep to be made by human nails. They circled each pool as if something had been trying to claw its way out of the water. Robert announced over the PA system that the park would reopen. Guests who had stayed for their rain checks began coming back in, completely unaware of what had just happened. The other lifeguards returned to their posts, many looking shaken, but saying nothing about the evacuation or the fog. During my break, I found Emily in the staff room looking at her untouched lunch. "You've seen it before, haven't you?" I asked, sitting across from her. "The fog." She nodded slowly. "Twice. Once, my first summer. Once last year." Her voice was flat. "Empty. It's always the same. The fog comes. Those things appear. John walks his pattern." "What are they?" Emily shrugged. "John never says exactly. Just that they want to get out." "Out of what?" "The water. Out, off wherever they're trapped." She looked up at me then, her eyes haunted. "You've worked here 3 summers, and I've only survived because of John. He's more than a lifeguard," she exclaimed. "He's a guardian." "Guardian of what?" Emily looked around, then leaned closer. "This place isn't just a water park. It's a prison, or a gateway or something. John keeps whatever's on the other side from getting through." After my shift ended, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to the county library, wanting to find out more about Sunset Cove and John's family. The old librarian helped me access their digital newspaper archives, and I looked for articles about the park's development. Most were basic business stories, groundbreaking ceremonies, opening day celebrations, economic impact reports. But one article from 1978 caught my eye. "Sullivan Water Park opens despite local opposition." The piece quoted several community members who opposed the park's construction, citing concerns about the land's history. One local historian claimed William Sullivan, the developer and John's grandfather, had made unorthodox arrangements to secure the property and permits. I kept digging and found an obscure weekly paper that had published a series of investigative articles about the park's construction. The reporter had interviewed former workers who talked about weird things at the building site, tools that moved overnight, unexplained cold spots, and strange sounds coming from the natural sinkhole that would later become the main pool. The most disturbing article talked about 3 construction workers who disappeared during a single week in 1977. The men had been working on the plumbing system that connected water to and from the sinkhole. They had reportedly complained about something moving in the water days before they vanished. The case was never solved. In a follow-up piece, the reporter hinted at occult arrangements made by William Sullivan to ensure the park's success, though no specific accusations were made. The reporter tried to interview Sullivan about these claims, but was turned away. Shortly after, the series of articles stopped abruptly with no explanation. I sat back in my chair, trying to make sense of what I had read. John wasn't just enforcing random rules. He was containing whatever his grandfather had unleashed during the park's construction. The blue locker, the woman in white, the man in the pool, the shadows in the fog, all connected to William Sullivan's account. And now Drew was gone, just like those construction workers decades ago. Was anything left of him? Or had he simply vanished? Another sacrifice to whatever was hiding beneath Sunset Cove. As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about those scratch marks around the pools, or Thettl's shadows moving through the fog. For 3 weeks I'd been swimming in those same waters, watching over children playing in them, all while something waited beneath the surface. I thought about quitting, just walking away from Sunset Cove and never coming back. But somehow I knew it wasn't that simple. As Emily had said, John was a guardian, and now I understood what he was protecting us from. The question was, could he contain it forever? And what would happen to all of us if he failed? I cursed under my breath as I drove back towards Sunset Cove Water Park, after a month of working there, surviving supernatural encounters and learning the weird rules that kept me alive. I'd gone and made a rookie mistake leaving my wallet in the break room. I'd already gotten home when I had realized it was missing, probably fallen out of my back pocket when I changed after my shift. The bright mirror lit up the empty parking lot as I pulled in. The park looked different at night, more iskery, without the happy families and splashing kids. Just big water, slide sand, still pools waiting. I used my key to enter through the service entrance, the metal door creaking as I pushed it open. The hallway lights were on their night-setting dim fluorescence, giving just enough light to see by. My footsteps bounced against the concrete floor as I made my way toward the staff area. The main pool deck was almost completely dark except for the safety lights underwater that stayed on all night. Those lights made strange rippling patterns across the walls and ceiling. I'd walked this way dozens of times during daylight hours, but now each shadow made me tense. Something moved and I froze. There was someone in the competition pool. The underwater light showed a person swimming laps with strong, steady strokes. I squinted, trying to make out who would be swimming at this hour. As the swimmer reached the wall nearest me and turned, I saw John's face. He must have stayed late for some reason. Maybe this was part of his guardian duties, checking the water itself. As if noticing me, John stopped mid-lap and treaded water. Looking my way, he raised his hand in a friendly wave. I paused, remembering all Fetham's John had warned me, saved me, guided me through all this super nav stuff. Without him, I would have broken rules and likely disappeared like Drew. I felt grateful as I started walking toward the edge of the pool, raising my hand to wave back. Michael. A woman's voice called my name from the direction of the locker rooms. I turned quickly. She stood about 20 feet away. The woman in white I'd seen behind the maintenance shed and later on the street corner, except something was different. Her weather was pulled back from her face now, showing features that looked more human than I remembered. Her expression seemed even protective. Michael, don't go to him, she pleaded, her voice gentle and urgent. That's not John. I froze, caught between them. The John in the pool continued treading water, watching me, waiting for something. The woman took a cautious step forward. Water pulled at her feet, even though the concrete floor was dry. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The real danger isn't me, she insisted, taking another step closer. It never was. He'd been told lies. My mind raced. John had always warned me about her. Rule 2 was explicitly about ignoring any woman behind the maintenance shed, but she hadn't been behind the shed tonight. She was here in the main building. Did the rules still apply? And if that wasn't the real John in the pool? I glanced back at the pool. The man who looked like John smiled, but there was something off about it. Too wide, too fake. He raised his hand to wave again, more insistently this time. The woman was only 10 feet away now. I've been trying to warn you, she said. He's the one who takes people. He took Drew. As she came closer, I could see her face more clearly in the dim light. She looked so normal, so genuinely concerned. But as I watched, something changed. A patch of skin near her temple rippled and peeled back slightly, revealing something gray and textured underneath that wasn't skin at all. She didn't seem to notice it happening. Stay back, I said, taking a step backward. She kept coming, her expression still concerned, still human, except for that peeling patch that was growing larger. Michael, please, you have to trust me. You don't have much time. Her jaw moved strangely as she spoke, as if the hinges were. Something was very wrong. Suddenly, someone tackled me from behind and knocked me to the ground. I rolled over ready to fight, then saw it was John, the real one, not the one in the pool. He looked like he was struggling. Get up, run, he shouted, pulling me tummy feet. Behind us, the woman let out an inhuman shriek. I looked back and saw her face splitting open, the jaw dropping far lower than any human anatomy would allow, revealing rows of Medell-like teeth. The skin of her face continued, peeling back like wet paper, showing the true creature beneath. At the same moment, the John thing in the pool rose partially out of the water. The upper body still maintained its human appearance, but below the chest, the shape bloated outward into something corpse-like and ugly. Its arms stretched as it pulled itself partly onto the pool deck, fingers extending into claw-like appendages. Both creatures shrieked in unison, a coordinated hunting call. That made my blood freeze. Move! John yelled, dragging me toward the exit. We're on across the pool deck, the sound of wet, slapping footsteps closed behind us. John pulled me through a side door I hadn't used before, slamming it shut and jamming a mop handle through the handles. That won't hold him long, Haggis beat, already moving again. We need to get outside the main building. What the hell were those things? I panted as we ran down a dark maintenance corridor. They work together, John said between labored breaths. Or with have one in the water, one on land. They need your permission to take you. A wave, a response, anything. We burst through another door into the staff parking area. John didn't stop until we reached my car. Get in, he ordered. Start it up. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. My wallet. Forget it, John snapped. We need to leave now. As the engine roared to life, I saw some movement at the service entrance. Two figures standing side by side watching us. One was dripping wet, the other completely dry, though there was a puddle forming at her feet. They weren't pursuing us anymore, just watching. John get into the passenger seat. "Drive," he said. "We need to talk." John didn't say much as I drove us away from Sunset Cove that night. He just kept looking out the rear window, watching for any sign we were being followed. I took us on a winding route through residential areas, avoiding main roads near any bodies of water. Neither of us suggested stopping anywhere. The night was full of shadows, and I didn't trust any of them. We ended up at John's small house about 2 miles inland. It was a modest single-story place, with hurricane shutters and a yard that looked more practical than decorative. He invited me in, but I declined, too shaken to do anything but go home and try to process what had happened. "Meet me tomorrow at Rosesteiner off Highway 41, he said before getting out. 9 a.m. I'll explain of everything. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face peeling away, revealing the thing underneath. I saw the not John rise from the pool, its body distorted and wrong. By the time my alarm went off, I'd maybe gotten 3 hours of broken sleep. Rosie's Diner was an old-school place with vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone honey. It sat almost 20 meters from Sunset Cove, which seemed intentional. John was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth far from windows or other customers. 2 coffee cups sat on the table, one in front of him and 1/8 empty spot across. I slid into the booth, the seat squeaking under me. John looked as tired as I felt, with dark circles under his eyes, and a tight expression that showed he hadn't slept either. "You came," he said, sounding a little surprised. "You said you'd explain everything." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, grateful for its warmth. "After what I saw last night, I needn't was." The waitress came by to refill our cups and take our orders. John asked for eggs and toast. I went with pancakes. Neither of us was actually hungry, but ordering food gave us an excuse to stay. When she left, John took a long drink of his coffee and set the mug down. "What do you know about boundaries? Like property lines? Like the boundaries between worlds?" He leaned forward, voice dropping lower. "Most places the boundary is solid. Here, Anthea stays separate, but some locations, they're like thin spots in fabric. Worlds press against each other." I thought about the things I'd seen at Sunset Cove over the past month, and the water park is one of those places. John nodded. "The original spot, the sinkhole where those people drowned in the 70s. It's a junction point. A place where our world, and something else, come close enough to touch." The waitress brought our food, and I stopped talking for a moment. When she left, John kept explaining as he cut up his eggs. "My grandfather discovered it in the 50s. He was a developer looking for cheap land, but he was also interested in other things, occult things. He recognized what that sinkhole is, so he built a water park on top of it." "That seems like a bad idea." John pushes his eggs around his plate. "Not if your goal is containment. Water has power. It can act as a conduit or a barrier, depending on how it's used. My grandfather designed the entire park as a containment system for the things in the water. And that woman, for everything that can slip through from the other side. The potman, the woman in white, they're just the most. There are others. You saw some during the fog event. I hadn't touched my pancakes. The syrup was congealing around them, forming a sticky moat. What are they? I don't know what they were originally. Things that died wrong. Maybe things that never lived in your sense of the word. They want to be here in our world. They want bodies, experiences, lives." John looked up from his plate. "They want to be real." A shiver ran through me as I remembered what John had told me about the woman behind the maintenance shed. "She isn't real anymore. The rules aren't random," John continued. "They're a binding contract, a sort of limitations that contain their influence. As long as we follow the rules, they can only do certain things in certain ways. Break the rules, and you give them permission to take you." "Like Drew," I said, quietly. John nodded, his expression grim. "He broke Rule 4. Opened the blue locker. What's in there?" "Nothing you want to see." John pushed his plate away, having eaten maybe 3 bites. "It's a direct access point to Drew that shouldn't be opened." I tried to imagine Drew's last moments, alone in the locker room, curious about what was behind that blue door. Maybe thinking the rules were just a prank on the new guy, opening it and finding what? A void, a monster, or nothing at all until it was too late. Why tell employees the rules without explaining the reasons? Wouldn't people be more careful if they knew the truth? Would you have believed me on your first day? John asked if I told you about entities from another reality living in our pools, or would you have quit on the spot, or worse, stayed but thought I was greasy, and ignored the rules? He had a point. I wouldn't have believed any of it without seeing it for myself. But that didn't mean the current system was working. Those symbols in employee files, the ones on the status unknown cases, they match your tattoo, don't they? John's hand moved unconsciously to his left forearm, covered by his long-sleeved shirt. Yes, show me. After pausing for a second, John rolled up his sleeve. On his inner forearm was a tattoo of connected symbols, circles joined by lines, strange, angular shapes, and characters that didn't belong to any alphabet I knew. The design was exactly the same as the red marks I'd seen in Toe's employee files. My grandfather designed it based on what he learned about the entities. It's a protection, of sorts, and a binding. The Sullivan family mark. John rolled his sleeve back down. My father wore it now, I do. Your father was the guardian before you. He took over where my grandfather got too old. I've been doing it since he died 15 years ago. The pieces started clicking together. So, it's a family business containing whatever's on the other city of that boundary. John nodded. 3 generations so far. Why not just class the park? Drain the pools. Tear it all down because the containment system is park. The layout of the pools, the circulation system, even the height off the slides. It's all part of the design. Destroy that, and there's nothing holding them back. John's eyes met mine. Deadly. Serious. If the park closes, they're free to go wherever they want. The reality of what he was saying sank in. Sunset Cove wasn't just a water park with a supernatural problem. It was a supernatural prison disguised as a water park. And John wasn't just a watch for he was the warden. That's why we reopened right after Drew disappeared. I realized why the park never stays closed for long after incidents. The system has to keep running. Exactly. My grandfather built it to last. But it needs maintenance. It needs guardians. John took a sip of his coffee, now cold. Which brings me to why I asked you here. You want me to quit? I guess actually, I want you to stay. I stared at him in surprise. You've survived a month. You've seen what's really happening. And you haven't run away screaming, "Yo, follow the rules." John leaned forward. I need someone I can trust. Someone who understands the real job. To be what? Your apprentice guardian. To be my backup. I can't be everywhere at once. As last night proved. The memory of the fake John in the pool sent another chill through me. That thing looked exactly like you. They can imitate what they see. It's how they hunt. The waitress came by again, eyeing our barely touched food with concern. She offered refills in coffee, which we both accepted more out of social obligation than desire. When she left, John continued, I can arrange for a pay increase. Hazard pay, essentially. Robert knows enough to approve it without a I sat back in the booth trying to process everything. John was offering me money to keep working at a supernatural danger zone, helping him maintain some occult containment system his grandfather had built. The practical part of me noted that extra money would help with tuition. The survival part of him screamed that I'd be insane to go back there. What if I say no? I asked. Then you walk away. Find another summer job. Try to forget what you've seen. John's expression softened slightly. I wouldn't blame you. It's not a burden Anion should have to take on. I thought about all the people who visited Sunset Cove every day. Families with children, teenagers on dates, seniors doing water aerobics. None of them knew what was hiding beneath the surface. What swam in the water with them. They were protected by John's watchfulness and a set of rules most of them would never know existed. I also thought about the missing lifeguards from previous summers. About Drew. About how easily I could have been known of them if I hadn't followed the rules. I'm sorry, I said finally. I can't do it. John nodded, not looking surprised. I understand. I need normal right now. Classes start back in a few weeks, and you don't have to explain. He cut in. Most people make the same choice. We sat in silence for a minute. Outside the diner, cars passed on the highway. People going about their ordinary lives, unaware of the things I now knew existed. What do I need to do? I asked. To leave safely. I mean, return your uniform. I'll handle the paperwork with Robert. John reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card with a phone number handwritten on it. If you ever see anything, the woman in white, the pool man, any sign of them outside the park, call me immediately. I took the card and put it in my wallet, trying not to think about how I had left my actual wallet at the park last night, the very thing that had nearly gotten me killed. There's one more thing, John added, his voice grave. Never go back to any body of water associated with Tepic. Not the pools, not the beach access points nearby, not even the drainage canals that connect to our system. You think they'd find me? I know they would. They've seen you now. They'll remember. His eyes held mine, making sure I understood. They don't give up once they've chosen a target. Anhar. Later, I was back at Sunset Cove, but I didn't go inside. John had texted Robert, who brought my things out to the parking lot. My wallet, a few personal items from my locker, and my final paycheck. Sorry to see you go, Robert said, not quite meeting my eyes. He knew why I was leaving, even if we didn't speak of it directly. You were a good lifeguard. Thanks for the opportunity, I replied. The formality of the exchange almost comical given what we both knew. I handed over my lifeguard whistle, just a simple object that represented a summer job that had turned into a nightmare. As I drove away from Sunset Cove Water Park for the final time, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see the woman in white standing in the road behind me or theward figure of the pool man coming up from a drainage ditch. But the road stayed empty, the day bright and normal. That night, I started writing everything down. All I'd seen, all I'd learned, thorals that had kept me alive. Maybe it was therapy, a way to process the insanity of the past month. Maybe it was a warning, though I wasn't sure who I was warning or how they'd ever find my arc out. Somewhere out there, the job posting that had drawn me to Sunset Cove would soon appear again. Lifeguards wanted competitive pay. No experience necessary. Another college student would need summer money. Another person wouldn't turn the cycle. John's family had kept going for generations. I closed my laptop and tried not to think about the thin places between worlds, or what might be looking through from the other side.